What is good, everyone? Welcome into this edition of the Views from the 573 podcast. Hope you guys are doing well as we continue to roll along with our NFL previews as we wrap up the NFC on this edition of the show and go to the NFC North. Talk about this, what I think is the toughest division that is being set up right now for the 2025 season. Just looking through all the notes, all the research, really kind of feels like this is the toughest division that we're going to have this upcoming season. So that always leads to an exciting conversation about these teams because, listen, somebody's got to finish in fourth place in this division. So, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago? All teams. We'll get into their off seasons, but a lot of big-time moves made by these organizations. Ben Johnson going to the Bears to be their head coach. That's really big. Hurts a rival. So we'll get into all that. So I'm really excited to talk about this division. It's probably the division I'm most excited to talk about. Unless it's the AFC North, in which you got the Peter Lewis factor in there. That you got to consider when talking about the Steelers. So I'm excited to talk about this division, and I hope you guys are ready to dive into this division as well. Let's get some programming reminders out of the way first. If you haven't yet listened to our other NFC pods, be sure to go check those out. Where you guys get your podcasts, right here on YouTube. Be sure to go check out those shows. If you're a visual person, kind of like how I am most of the time, you can go check the pods out. Got some good graphics on like who these teams lost, added draft picks, all that good stuff. So if you want to check out the YouTube version, be sure to go to the YouTube channel, 573 Podcast. Like, share, comment, subscribe with, and do all that good YouTube stuff. And then on the entertainment side, we'll talk about that here for a couple of seconds. We got some pods coming down the road along with movies that have come out. Superman, Fantastic Four. We're getting that stuff scheduled and locked in as well. So excited to talk about those two movies with Charles and Peter down the road. It should be a good conversation with both of them. And then I think the only other thing I'm missing is on this feed, we got college football as well. That's going to be mainly audio, but we're going to be diving into the college football season here, taking a look at these conferences. We've already tackled the ACC. If you want to check that one out, be sure to go, again, check us out where you guys get your podcasts. But we got the ACC up. Plan is to do the Big 12 next and make our way through the major conferences and talk about some of the other notable teams like your Notre Dames. I'm not sure how the Pac-2. I'm not sure how that division is going with because they made a lot of expansions, added some teams, Boise State, all those teams. So I don't know if we'll talk too much about them, but nonetheless, we'll talk about that in the lead up to college football, which is going to be starting here in about a month. So we're rapidly approaching kickoff for what I consider is one of the most fun sports that we have here in college football. Contrary to what Matt thinks, because we know Matt's opinion on college football. So it's just a bunch of 18 to 20, 21-year-olds just, not figuring out what to do. So, and then you get all the NIL stuff added into that too. So we'll talk about that here later on, but let's dive into the NFC North, shall we? Of course, let's talk about some of the more notable things from last year in this division. Detroit winning this division, and you got the Vikings finishing where they did, having double-digit wins, and obviously, a lot of debate about their seeding as a team that won so many games. You got the Packers sneaking in there as well. So, again, a tough division. You had 3 playoff teams from this division last year, and then you had the Bears coming in 4th place with Caleb Williams, which was a big talking point. They fired their head coach, Matt Eberflus, and they were on the lookout for a new head coach. So trying to get somebody to help Caleb. You drafted him number 1. You believe he's a franchise-changing guy. And we're going to get into them, and we got them up first. So let's talk about what the Bears did. And again, I'll have the graphics up, and we'll talk about it more in depth. I will say there is one piece I miss on the AFC North graphic that Peter astutely brought up. Is like, there's no Aaron Rodgers here. So it's just, I think I just kind of forgot about him. I think like how everybody probably wishes they forgot about Aaron Rodgers. So I guess I manifested that there. But the Chicago Bears, what they were up to this 2025 offseason, let's get into that. Some of the big pieces they made, a couple coaching hires. Of course, the big one, hiring Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions to be their head coach. He added Dennis Allen, who was the Saints head coach last year. He's now the defensive coordinator over there in Chicago. They were really busy this offseason with bringing back their own guys on extensions, guys like Kyler Gordon, TJ Edwards, and bringing them in. But then they really tackled free agency and really tackled the interior of this offensive line that sorely needed some help up front, needed some reinforcements. They go in free agency. They signed Dayo Adengbo to his second contract, 3 years, $48 million. Grady Jarrett, the longtime Falcon, is going to Chicago. Drew Dahlman, another Falcon, going to Chicago, and made a couple trades for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson from the Rams. So they really addressed the interior, and we'll dive into more of them diving into the interior and really getting some beef up front with those guys and improving the talent level. A couple guys they lost: Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Tevin Jenkins, Coleman Shelton, Matt Pryor, Darrell Taylor. Then their draft picks. Got 3 second-rounders, made a couple trades, got 3 second-rounders. Their first-round pick, Colson Loveland from Michigan. They took him, the tight end from Michigan, pair him with Cole Kmet. Then they drafted Luther Burden, 39 overall. He fell all the way to the second round. They drafted him, the receiver from Mizzou. Then their final 2 picks in the second round, they took Ozzie Trapillo, the big offensive tackle from Boston College, and then Shamar Turner, the defensive tackle from Texas A&M. So, talking about the Bears, again, this feels like a team. I guess we can talk about the Ben Johnson of it all. I guess let's talk about that, because that is going to be the big talking point with this Bears team is Ben Johnson coming over from Detroit, who's an excellent play caller there. Just was able to dial up so many things, kept the defense on their feet, didn't know what he was going to call from one play to the next, and was just really creative in how he was able to set things up and really get the defense confused there. So he comes on over, becomes a head coach. The one thing I think that is probably a concern is just like him just becoming a head coach instead of just being a full-time play caller. I think that's one of the things when you become a head coach, you're like a CEO now. You have your hands in all types of things as a head coach, and not just as an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator where you're just focusing on the defensive game plan, the offensive game plan. Like, you're focused on a whole lot more. You're into so many things. You got to deal with this, that, just like you got a lot of things on your plate as a head coach compared to being an OC or a DC. So it's going to be something to watch. And just, is the play calling going to be affected by having, being a part of so many different things as a head coach? We've seen others do that well. We've seen others have not done that well, going from the coordinator to the head coaching role. So that's going to be, for him, I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on, is can he still be that excellent play caller that we saw in Detroit while also being a head coach and being a full-time CEO of a team out there on the sideline. So I think that's something to keep an eye on with Ben Johnson. But I mean, this is the type of guy that you exactly needed to kind of change the ecosystem with this offense. I mean, the quarterback talk about, not having a 4,000-yard passer has been beaten to death like ad nauseum. So, but we're still going to be talking about it because that's going to be the key thing here, is because you got a guy that can potentially do that in Caleb Williams, who did not have a bad rookie season by any stretch. He's a pretty solid rookie season, but was just overshadowed by what Jaden Daniels did, by what Bo Nix was able to do, by Drake May had some nice moments, but he was overshadowed by a couple of his fellow rookie quarterbacks. So when you got that to go along with Ben Johnson here, and where you got a offensive coach, the system is going to stay the same. That is going to be big for him as he continues to grow and develop and tries to be that first 4,000-yard passer that we've seen for the Bears in a long time, in their history. So it feels like now they got a good coordinator, a good guy to come in and really get a excellent ecosystem infrastructure around Caleb Williams and trying to build this to where he is set up for success. I mean, that's what they kind of did this offseason. You take a look at what they did with the offensive line, with their weapons. It's all about helping Caleb Williams, giving him the best chance to succeed. And that's what you need to do for your young quarterback, rookie quarterback, second-year quarterback. You want to get them in the best spots possible. And having Ben Johnson being the offensive mastermind for this team, but also doing what they did this all season, that's a step forward in the right direction. So it's exactly what they needed with this offense, just like, game planning, pass protection, again, infrastructure, getting things right there, getting some reinforcements to really help out, because the offensive line was an issue on the interior. Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright, they're solid on the outside, but they needed some help there. You saw the Detroit offensive lines, how good they were, and Ben Johnson sees that like, listen, I'm going to need that with this team as well. With Dahlman coming in, Jonah Jackson, Thuney, and listen, they spent a lot on those guys, free agency, draft capital wise, and inevitably one of those guys will not work. One of those guys will not work. At the best, two of them will work. And even if that's the case, that's still an upgrade from what they had last year. So if you're the Bears, you're like, okay, that's fine with us. Left tackle is a little bit of a question mark right now because Braxton Jones is coming off an injury, and from what I've read, he has not been doing anything this offseason. So it's kind of in wait-and-see mode, and that's kind of a big issue because left tackle, one of the most important positions in all of football, and Ozzie Trapillo, their second-round pick, who can play left tackle, has not been signed yet because, of course, you got a lot of second-rounders that have not been signed yet. Some have signed here recently. Shamar Turner has signed. And a lot of those guys, those second-round picks for the Bears, they're probably going to be playing key roles. If I'm being honest, I think Burden is probably not going to have as key of a role as Turner or Trapillo, especially considering the Braxton Jones situation. So that's something to monitor with him. But I think just the way that this offense is now set up now, where you have Colston Loveland now coming in at 10, it feels like it gives the Bears options. It gives Ben Johnson options on what he wants to do on offense. Does he want to roll out both Kmet and Loveland out there? Does he want to go 3 wide receivers? What does he want to do? It gives him the options to go and create all these different plays and formations. And Loveland, he could potentially, I think, have, I don't know if Sam Laporta impact is where it's at, but this guy is a really good pass catcher, really reliable pass catcher, and I think could become one of Caleb's favorite targets because of how reliable he is as a pass catcher. So you add him into this mix, and again, Luther Burden, I think with where they were at, I believe is 39. You had Judkins and Henderson go the pick before. So you take Burden, and I think for a guy like him who, was projected very high, was a former top 5 recruit, I think this is a good spot for him to come in where he's not going to be relied on to be the guy. It's going to be DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. It's going to be those two guys. So we're looking at him as a 4th or 5th option in this offense, and which I think that's a good place for him to be in, coming in as a rookie. But again, the contract situation with all these second round picks, we'll have to see. But I think that's a good spot for him to be in within this offense and just not have to be relied on really early on in his career, and just being thrust into like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 role, like some other receivers, like, Ted McMillan in Carolina, where he can just kind of chill out a little bit and just be kind of like that 4th or 5th best option, but as a very explosive 4th or 5th option that Ben Johnson, I'm sure, will find ways to use. I will say the one thing I wish the Bears would have done was running back, because the run game in Detroit with Gibbs and Montgomery and how lethal that duo is. I figured that they would try to do that, considering Ben knows the importance of that, but it really wasn't addressed. I believe they didn't take a running back until the 6th round, 7th round, and it was a deep class. So I figured they would take one in spots, but with how they were set up, they had 3 second-round picks, didn't have a third, and Henderson again was taken right before their pick at 39. So if he doesn't go there, then maybe he goes to Chicago at 39. If the Patriots go in a different direction. But it was a deep class. I figured they would have added somebody, but it feels like they are going to rely on DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson to be their duo. I don't know if it's the best course of action, but listen, in the first year of this regime, if the one thing you're complaining about is the lack of a running game, but everything else is fine, you'll take that. You'll take that. If you see improvements from Caleb in this offense, the offense really start to look more explosive. If the one thing you lack is a solid run game, if the run game's like, I don't know, the middle of the pack in the NFL, and everything else is fine, I think you'll take that definitely if you're the Bears. So I think this offense is in a lot better shape than they have been for years. So I'm really excited to watch how this Ben Johnson experiment goes in Chicago. I'm really excited to see what he does with all these guys, and just seeing what he did in Detroit. I'm sure that's got a lot of guys in that locker room excited, considering what he did, how he got the most out of those players there, and really kind of understood their strengths and what he could do with that as a play caller. So I think as a Bears fan, I think there's a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of reason for that excitement. Defensively, I think one of the other things, as we talk about defense really quickly here, is just kind of like the way that they're set up now with this team, with this defense. Dennis Allen calling the plays and being more of an attacker as a defensive coach, and kind of like how he likes big edge rushers. Odengbo makes a lot of sense. It's just like coming off his first contract, not a whole lot there. So you're hoping with the second contract that it's well worth it. And with the timeline the Bears are on, I think it makes sense, and I think you're fine with that. The Grady Jarrett one is a little bit more of a head scratcher, considering his age, and it might be market value for what the defensive tackles got with Kinlaw, Jonathan Allen, Hargrave. But it just is kind of like a head scratcher, and maybe you wonder, like, hey, could we have allocated those resources elsewhere? Could we have gotten somebody else? Could we have gotten a second edge rusher alongside Montez Sweat, or could we have gotten another secondary player, or could go somewhere else? So it makes you wonder if they could have gone somewhere else, if they could have allocated those resources somewhere else. But I mean, with the way this defense is set up, you got your guys in Sweat and Jalen Johnson, legit guys that I think Dennis Allen is going to really love to deploy. TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edwards, attacking linebackers. I think it fits right into Dennis Allen's system. So Allen, I've always kind of thought of as a better defensive coach than a head coach. And I think, with what he did in getting that Saints job, a few years ago, I think, he did a good job defensively then, and then he got that job. So I think this will be good for him. I think they'll be set up for success. But I'm really excited about the Bears. I'm really excited to sit down and watch them, see how they come together, how all this comes together for Chicago with a lot of these young guys, with a rookie head coach. It should be fun to watch, as a as a regular fan, as somebody that keeps an eye on fantasy football. It should be a whole lot of fun to watch, see how all this unfolds, and see how explosive this offense, I think, can get. And again, Caleb is just, you need to set him up for success, and that's what they did. That's a very clear goal in mind. They set, and they're looking to set him up for success with the moves they made, and really getting that interior beefed up, making sure that's not a weakness, and getting him the best weapons possible that can surround him. You get guys like DJ Moore, who's consistently good, Odunze, who had a solid rookie season, Komet, who's a solid tight end, pretty good tight end, and then you add Loveland in that group. I think you're really going to be set up really well if you're Caleb, that really take that next step. But a lot of it's going to be on him. But he's got a really good ecosystem around him. He's got a good head coach, and that's what you need. You need a good ecosystem around him, like all these young quarterbacks do. And so I think that's set up for him now, and I'm excited to see what he can do next season. All right, next up, let's take a look at the team that Ben Johnson left, and let's take a trip up to the Motor City and talk about the Detroit Lions. As let's go through what they had happen to them this offseason. Who they brought in to replace those guys. Of course, the big thing was losing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, losing them to head coaching roles. So you got to replace them. So they went out. They added Johnny Morton as their offensive coordinator, brought in, Kelvin Shepard, promoted him from within to be their defensive coordinator. And then just taking a look at what all they did, signed Kirby Joseph to a monster extension. Derek Barnes, Avonte Maddox, brought him in. Levi Onwuzurike, who is hurt now, so that is a big time loss for them up front. Marcus Davenport, and then probably their biggest addition was bringing in DJ Reed, the former New York Jets corner, to come along and help out with their cornerback room and really get a big time player there. Of course, losing Ben Johnson, losing Aaron Glenn, you lose those two guys. Teddy Bridgewater left as well. Kevin Zeitler, the longtime guard there, Frank Ragnow, retired here recently, so that's a big time loss for them at their center position. Zadarius Smith, Carlton Davis, Emmanuel Mosley, they all left. So a lot of pieces left from this Lions team. Draft, they went out in the first round, took Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. Second round, they took Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia. In the third round, they traded up. They traded a couple future third-round picks for Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver from Arkansas. And then the fifth round, took Miles Frazier from LSU, the guard. So they took a couple offensive linemen. And it felt like this is a very, typical from what the Lions have been the last few years. It felt like a typical Lions draft. I think is to the surprise of no one that they took three guys on the interior that are going to help beef things up for this group. It definitely fits their MO. So I think for them, the main talking point here is obviously losing both their coordinators. Eventually, this was going to happen. I think, for them to be there as long as they were, I think for the Lions is, just icing on the cake, considering how well thought of they were around the league and how Ben Johnson, from after his first year with the Lions, was immediately interviewing for head coaching jobs. And, if we're being honest, there's probably a good shot, considering how the league has thrived for offensive play callers for their teams, how very fortunate, the Lions were that, he didn't leave after year one and that he stuck around for a couple more years and got the job that makes sense for him. And again, I think it makes sense for him considering that system that, you got a young quarterback in there. But for what he did with that group, with all those players, was nothing short of exceptional. And Aaron Glenn, likewise, that team got hurt a lot here, especially last year. A lot of injuries, especially the Aiden Hutchinson, who they get back. And he was able to do the most that he could, and he did a pretty solid job with what he had in front of him. So, there's a reason why those two are now head coaches. So to have them for as long as they did, I think is for them is like, they can't believe it. It's just like, how are we able to keep these guys for as long as we did before another team snatched them up? So eventually this was going to come. This was going to happen at some point or later. I think the Lions are probably glad that happened later, but anyway, they're going to they had to replace those two guys, and they are getting two guys that are very green play callers, especially Shepard, who was a position coach for the Lions, now promoted to the big job of being a DC. So he's going to be thrown right into it, He's going to get his feet wet really quick. And Johnny Morton does have some play calling experience, but that's been a long time for him. So very green play callers here for this Lions group. I think that's going to be, for this Lions team this year in 2025, that's going to be the main thing, I think, for everybody to watch is, will that affect them and how they go about their business this year? Because if you take a look at this group, if you take a look at the Lions the last few years, they've been really good on, especially on offense. Got explosive playmakers everywhere on the field, and just what Dan Campbell's been able to get out of this group, you wonder, will this, will losing those two guys, will that really kind of slow things down for their momentum, as far as like being a true contender in the NFC. So I think that's going to be the key thing to watch for them, is just like, how much will losing those two guys affect them heading into this year, where you got two very new play callers that are going to be calling the shots on both sides of the ball. So we'll have to see. But the great thing, though, is a lot of those guys are back. A lot of those big time pieces on both sides are back. So, you don't have to worry about that. As far as the Lions go, the one big addition was DJ Reed. They've been handing out extensions to all their big time players, and they should. Drafting the way they have, you should. They've been handing out extensions as they should, and you got Aiden Hutchinson's extension coming up here pretty soon, in which I think the cap hit would be lowered once you get his extension, and they can do a lot of restructuring with a lot of those deals. But it makes sense. Those guys absolutely deserve them, so it makes sense. But they're going to be a little bit over the cap here for the next couple of years. So they can only do so much in adding to this team, which it makes me wonder what, the two future third round picks, why would they give those up, considering of them being in this type of space right now, going and getting Isaac Tesla, who probably not the first choice, I think, for a lot of draft pundits as far as like getting a X receiver for the Lions, but it's a way, it's a method, and they obviously saw something in him. They were willing to trade two future third round picks for him, so they went up to go and get him. So the Lions are going to be an interesting spot this year with their coordinators and with this team, and just seeing what happens with them. The offensive line is going to be, I think, a key part to watch with this group, considering Kevin Zeitler's left. Ragnow has retired, so there's going to be some reshuffling there with this offense line, and it's going to look very different. Like, obviously, you got Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell on the left and right sides, so you're fine there. But the interior is going to be where you're going to keep an eye on things, especially who takes that center position, because with Ragnow suddenly retiring, that thing is up for grabs. Could it be Graham Glasnow, who hasn't played center in a while? Could it be Tate Ratledge, who figured to be a key part as far as like playing guard? Does he find himself there? Or is it somebody like Miles Frazier? Does he find himself there? Or Christian Mahogany, who's a second-year player that the Lions are really excited about. So that leaves a lot of questions with this offensive line on the interior. And Frank right now retiring just left a big hole in the offensive line, was a mainstay for him, and was a key productive player for them for so many years. And so now you got options of who can maybe step in that role, but who's going to be the best option, who's going to stand out, and then you got to figure out the rest of your offensive line. Like, okay, who's going to play guard, who's going to play, so it's going to be a key question mark for them heading into the season, the offensive line turnover that they've had here in the last couple months. So that's something to watch as well. Defense, I think it should be interesting to watch. DJ Reed coming in, you got Terrion Arnold there, and, with the signings that they've made, Avonte Maddox is good depth. It allows Rakestraw a little bit more time for him to develop as well. Now that you brought in DJ Reed, you lost Carlton Davis, so now you bring in Reed, who, can help out, was a solid second corner for the Jets alongside Sauce Gardner. So he's not going to have a guy like Gardner's talent across from him, in Detroit, but he should be set up, I think, pretty well. I think another thing also is just adding other pass rushers alongside Hutchinson. It feels like we've been talking about that since Hutchinson came on the scene for the Lions and was drafted by them. So it feels like we've been talking about that for forever since he was drafted. So I think that's another thing I would have liked to see them do, is add some more pass rushers, because I don't know how much Pascal, Marcus Davenport, how much they can do. Now you got a solid interior. You got DJ Reader, and you got Aleem McNeil, but those guys coming off injuries. So this was a very injury-ridden defensive line last year, and I imagine that's not going to be the case this year. You're not going to have these catastrophic injuries to a lot of your big-time defensive line guys. I just don't think that's going to be the case for Detroit this year. Those guys are going to be, even though you did lose Arun Zurike, he's going to be done, I think, for the season. So that's not off to a great start, but I don't think you're going to have that type of injury concerns for this upcoming season. I really don't think that's going to, happen for a second straight season. That would just be, I think, kind of, that would just be kind of wild if it did happen for a second straight season. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I feel like adding another guy to help out Hutchinson, team up with them, and really kind of take some pressure off him, I kind of feel like that's where I would have gone. So I think that position, another receiver alongside St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Again, we'll see how Tesla works out. Maybe they could have gone out and added somebody else in the draft, or get a different X receiver in the draft where they did. But, I mean, other than that, I think the big thing for the Lions, again, is their play callers on both the sides of the ball. I mean, we know who's going to be there. We know Gibbs is going to be good. Goff is going to be solid. Laporta is going to be great. Amon-Ra is going to be great. So we know the main players. They're going to be good. But it's just the play callers and the guys trying to find mismatches on both those sides. I think that's going to be, for the Lions, the thing to watch with them is how they can adjust to new play callers after having Glenn and Johnson in the building for so long. But at least you got Dan Campbell. He's still there, and he's still, he's going to be his uber aggressive self. So you still got him there. So I want to see that part won't change. that won't change. As long as he's head coach there, they're going to be uber aggressive. So that's not going to change. But I kind of think that's where we're going to end it off with the Lions. Again, it's just a question of their coordinators and just like how are they going to look for 2025 with new guys calling plays. So that's I think that's where we're going to leave it off with the Detroit Lions. And let's go to Green Bay and go talk about the Packers. And they made the playoffs last year. Second straight year they made it under Jordan Love while he's been the quarterback. And last year ended up losing to the Eagles in a not so great fashion. So, and he was real, Jordan Love had a lot of injuries that he was concerned about, over the course of the season. So that was a little bit of a hindrance for them as well. But nonetheless, they still made the playoffs, still got in there. But I think the thing that the Packers want to do is like, hey, listen, we feel like we got a good shot to win. Let's go and beef up. Let's go and add some pieces here that's going to ensure we're going to win. So taking a look at what the Packers did, just kind of a lot of small moves that, except with the exception of two. Brent Manis, he's back. Isaiah McDuffie is back. They brought in McCole Hardman, adding a speed element there. I think that's a key thing to watch with them, with their wide receiver group. And then they added Nate Hobbs to a 4-year contract, paid him a lot of money. And then Aaron Banks was the big signing. Making a pun here, broke the bank kind of for him. 4 years, $77 million, bringing him in to really beef up the offensive line. In the offseason, A.J. Dillon, Andre Dillard, Josh Myers, T.J. Sladen, they're all gone. And then the cornerback room it's a really group that's going to have a lot of turnover that we'll talk about. Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, and then Corey Ballantyne as well. They're all gone. So it's a new group of corners that are going to be getting a lot more playing time now with the Packers. And in the draft, Matthew Golden, they finally took a receiver in the first round at 23. And they go take Anthony Belton from NC State in the second. Savion Williams, the Swiss Army knife receiver from TCU, in the third. Fourth, Baron Sorrell. And then in the fifth, also Colin Oliver. So they didn't really address defense until later on. And that kind of feels what the Packers, I kind of understand it, with the Packers, with where they feel their defense is at. Because, their defense overall last year was pretty solid for the most part. You had Jeff Haley coming in from Boston College to run that defense, and they were pretty good. The total defense, they were really good. They were a top 10 total team in total defense, top 10 team in scoring defense, top 10 in sacks with their group. So they were a really rock solid group coming into this season, and they should be, because of the amount of first round picks that they spent on that front seven, on those, edge rushers, defensive tackles. They should be. And I think that's kind of why you didn't see a whole lot of additions there in free agency and the draft. Is like, what else can you do? You're spending high level picks on guys on the front seven. Yeah, it's time to produce. What else can you do? What else can you add up there? You can only do so much. So it makes perfect sense that, why they did what they did this offseason, and waiting to add a guy like Sorrell till the fourth round. They felt like, hey, listen, we're fine. Even with this group we had, we're expecting a whole lot more from them as former first round picks. We're expecting a lot of improvement, built-in improvement from them. So it made a whole lot of sense why they did the way they did with the front seven. It makes a lot of sense. Edgerrin Cooper, I'm sure they're really excited about him. He came on his rookie season at linebacker as a guy that came in from Texas A&M and was able to wreak havoc and had the game slowed down for him. So I think that's really exciting for Green Bay, to have a guy in the middle of your defense that can be that type of guy and really help out with, being able to clean up messes up front. But the secondary is going to be the key thing for them. Xavier McKinney, that's, you got proven production there. And then I think one thing that I think is going to be something to watch, besides the whole secondary in general, is that you do have three capable young safeties that they took last year, and Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, and Keaton Oladapo, that came in, produced as rookies. I think it's just like, who's going to step up? Who's going to be that safety that's going to be Xavier McKinney's tag team partner back there? Who's it going to be? Javon Bullard does offer a lot of versatility. He can play safety. He can play nickel. So he's got some versatility there. So, but it's just going to be who's going to be from that group of three safeties that's going to step in and in year two really kind of take that other safety position alongside McKinney and be his running mate back there. I think that's going to be one thing to watch along with the rest of the secondary, is just because, again, there's a lot of turnover there, losing three guys there. And I mean, Alexander really hadn't played a whole lot in the last couple of years. So I don't know if it's a loss since you already really didn't have him for the better part of the last couple seasons. But nonetheless, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, they're going to see increased roles. Nate Hobbs, of course, is as well. He's a guy that can play outside and inside. And I feel like that's one thing with this Packers team, and we'll talk about offensively as well, is that the guys that have a lot of versatility. But I think the one thing you want to have here is like want to have a clear plan. Like you can have all these ideas, like, hey, this guy can do this guy can do that, we can do this, and this. But you want to have a clear plan for them and what you envision them to be in your system. Offensively, going to that side, we've been starting on the offense for I feel like for a lot of these teams, but offensively, again, you take a look at Jordan Love. There's a lot of inconsistencies last year. He got banged up last year, missed some games. So it really kind of plagued his second year as the full-time quarterback of this group here. And there's a lot of inconsistencies alongside this offense. The receiving group, you hope that somebody like Jaden Reed, who had a really solid rookie season, that he would, in year two, really get more acclimated, elevate his game. Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, all those guys. There's no true star here in this group for the Packers in this receiving group. And honestly, for the defensive side as well, there's not really a big time star for them. It's just like a bunch of B plus kind of level players. They're really good, but none that stand out. And I think, you take Matthew Golden, I think you're hoping that he can be an A minus at the very least type of guy that can really help your offense and really translate things and get things to another level that can add a different type of element to your offense, because he adds a speed element that can take a top off the defense. And Jordan Love, he loves taking chances downfield. So maybe he can add that. And Christian Watson, he's going to be out, and you don't know how long he's going to be out for this season. I saw something where it said like potentially November. So in that case, he's going to be a guy that you're going to expect that, hey, go try to take the top off, add a different element to this offense. So, and hope that he's a little bit more consistent, and maybe hope that Reed, Dobbs, they can be more consistent. Dontavian Wicks, that they can be a little bit more consistent. I mean, you do know Tucker Kraft was really good last year. Luke Musgrave was pretty solid as well. So you got your guys there. But somebody from that group is going to have to step up at receiver and become a impact player. The run game was really big for them last year. Jacobs was really good. And listen, Matt LaFleur as a play caller is good every year. It feels like this division has a plethora of good play callers. It feels like, we'll have to see with the Lions, but LaFleur, excellent play caller. O'Connell's an excellent play caller. And Ben Johnson's an excellent play caller. It's just, you got a lot of really good play callers in this division. And of course, Ben was always there, but he's now the head coach now, and where you have to see how it looks like in Chicago. So a lot of good play callers here. So I don't think there's any doubt of LaFleur's play calling abilities there. It's just like having more consistency at that skill position with the receivers. So the offensive line, I think, is something else to talk about, considering adding Aaron Banks. I don't have it here because it just happened, but they extended Zach Tom, the right tackle. So this offensive line is going to see a little bit of an upgrade. They want to get bigger, stronger, more physical to kind of complement Josh Jacobs' physical running style. And Belton, the tackle from NC State's a big guy. Banks is a big guy. And so now you're looking at kind of the configuration of this offensive line and just kind of projecting like what it can be. You could potentially have Rasheed Walker at left tackle, and if he wins that job, then Jordan Morgan, their 24th first-round pick, I imagine goes and slides into one of the guard spots. Banks takes one of the other spots. Jenkins takes the center position, and then you have Zach Tom at right tackle. Like, in theory, this offensive line looks pretty solid, looks pretty good. for Jordan Love. That can really help him, protect him, keep him upright, make sure he's not banked up, at any point this season. It gives them time to find those guys, to find Matthew Golden, to find Jaden Reed. And I'm curious about how good Golden's going to be right away. I think if he is good right away, then I think that takes his offense to another level. And for LaFleur, I mean, again, the excellent play caller that he is, he's going to take advantage of that. And I think that can open up a little bit more of this offense. So it's going to be one of those guys like Reed or Dobbs or Wicks to step up. But this offensive line, in theory, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good, for this group up front to really kind of, if they want to lean on that physical run game with Jacobs, who again, was a guy that ran for over 1,300 yards last year. If that's something you want to explore, then you can. But it's going to be a lot of these pass catchers that you're going to have to look at and say, like, hey, somebody's going to have to step up. And if Watson's going to be out for most of the year, Wicks, Reed, Dobbs, one of you guys is going to have to step up. Golden, you're going to have to see how he does as a rookie. Somebody's going to have to step up for this group if they want to get to where they want to go. If they feel like they are a team that feels like they're ready now to compete, somebody at receiver is going to have to step up. And Jordan Love's going to be a little bit more consistent. He's going to have to be a little bit more healthy. But again, I think the offensive line, having that offensive line in theory, again, I think that can really help them keep them upright. So I think just take a look at the Packers. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's just like, how is all this going to come together and get them to where they want to go? I think that's going to be the key thing here for the Packers here as we look to them in 2025. All right, and then our final team, the Minnesota Vikings. Let's take a look at what they did this past offseason. Really busy offseason for them as far as bringing guys back, adding guys. A couple things to take note of. They added a year to Andrew Van Ginkel's current deal. So you keep him for another year. Byron Murphy got a big extension. Aaron Jones is sticking around. Theo Jackson, the same thing. But from free agency, Will Freeze. I don't know how to pronounce it. Again, it's just a pronunciation type of thing. Like, it looks like Fries, but I've heard it pronounced Freeze, like Mr. Freeze from Batman. So I don't know. But they bring him in, big contract, 5 years, $88 million. Jonathan Allen, Jonathan Hargrave, beef up the interior with those two defensive tackles. Ryan Kelly, another Colt coming over to be a Viking. Isaiah Rodgers, Rondale Moore, they traded for Jordan Mason. And then this is an addition because of his injury from last year. But J.J. McCarthy is now QB1. And we'll talk about that. He's now QB1. He's back from injury. So in addition to, front off the injury list from last year, lost a couple guys. Sam Darnold, the big notable one, let him go and felt comfortable with JJ and letting him be the guy. Cam Robinson, Garrett Bradbury, let him go. Ed Ingram, Patrick Jones, Shaquille Griffin, and Cameron Bynum, who got a big deal from Indy. So, kind of a little bit of a swap here, 2-for-1 with the Indy and Minnesota, kind of swapping players here in the draft. Not a whole lot to talk about here. 3 draft picks to talk about. Donovan Jackson in the first round from Ohio State, guard. Plug him in there. Ty Felton from Maryland in the third. And then Tyrion Dawkins Ingram, the defensive tackle from Georgia. I think another thing, one thing we've talked about with these teams, and kind of the same thing with Chicago here, is Minnesota saw a need to address up front. They just were not the team that they wanted to be up front on defense, offense. They clearly felt there was a need here for the interior and getting some help, getting some reinforcements, upgrades. That was a plan here. You take a look at how they went through this offseason. They went, looking at what the Bears did. They traded for 2 guards and they signed a center. They signed a guard, they signed a center, and then they drafted another guard. So it kind of a little bit of a different way of doing things in Chicago, but they did that. They went and addressed Freeze, who's a pretty good guard in this league. Ryan Kelly's got a lot of experience in this league, the guy that knows how to call an offense up front. protections, all that stuff. So you got a really experienced guy out there. Then you draft Donovan Jackson at guard, who is going to be a plug-and-play type of guy. And, like, listen, we know this offense line. You got Darisaw, Brian O'Neill, excellent 1-2 punch at tackle. And then Freeze, Kelly. I mean, we'll have to see. Kelly's a little bit older. How much does he have left? Freeze is coming off injury. But if Donovan Jackson's your worst offensive lineman, as your first-round pick, if he's your worst offensive lineman, I think you're in a pretty good spot here if you're Minnesota. And I think that really helps out Aaron Jones. Like, I gotta imagine Aaron Jones is really happy about that, because now it looks like they can enforce a physical run game. And I imagine for Kevin O'Connell, he doesn't need any more help as a play caller. He's already really good. But I think having the element of a solid running game, a physical run game, I think that can really enhance what he's able to do and what he's able to call for his offense with Justin Jefferson, with Jordan Addison, with TJ Hawkinson, with those guys. I think adding a physical run game and having that be not be a weakness for him, but be, even if it's just average, I think that can still help him out. Now, if they're above average, if they're pretty good, then I think for this offense, it didn't need any more help. But to have that, I think can really help him, and trying to really help him out with the play calling and adding that element to this offense that already has a lot of good weapons at receiver, tight end. I think that can be big time for him as a play caller. But they clearly saw the need to address up front for the interior and for the defense. But I think also it helps out. Obviously, it helps out J.J. McCarthy, who it steps in a really great situation here as a second-year player, or a rookie. Technically this is his rookie season, but he stepped into a good spot. As a rookie, you got KOC as your play caller, you got second best, first best. The ongoing debate about who's the first, second best receiver in the league, but Jefferson. You got him. Addison, really good last year in the second year. Hawkinson is a good tight end. Aaron Jones is a good running back. You got upgrades on the offensive line. Like, if you're J.J. McCarthy, you're stepping into a really good infrastructure here coming into your rookie season. I think you can't ask for anything more if you're J.J. And I think with how KOC does with his quarterbacks, I think McCarthy's going to be in really good hands with how this thing is going to go, with how this thing is going to operate. And honestly, I don't really have too many questions about this offense. Of course, besides how JJ is going to look in this offense as a young quarterback, just like how's he going to operate within this offense. But he's set up really well. He's set up for success. And again, like we talked about with Caleb up top, for your young quarterbacks, you need to set them up for success with play callers. Just like the whole infrastructure around them, with the play calling, the weapons, the offensive line around them. You need to make sure you got a good infrastructure set up. And if you don't, that you make sure that you build towards that to let them have success and be that guy that you want them to be, that you drafted them to be, where you did. So I think that's JJ's going to be in a really good spot, but just like obviously seeing how he does, the offensive line can freeze, getting that big contract and being hurt towards the end of last year. Can he come back healthy? Ryan Kelly, how much left does he have left? Other than that, I really have no questions about this Vikings offense. I think, they're ready to go. This is exactly what they need to do in addressing up front and trying to get more physical. And this is the right step. So I like these moves. I do also like the moves on defense and getting Hargrave and Allen, but for them, it's a little bit different. Those guys are in their 30s. They've been banged up here recently. And those are pretty sizable deals that they got. Looking back at the graphic and looking back in the notes, again, Hargrave got 2 years for $30 million. Jonathan Allen got 3 years for $51. And I think from what I've read, they can get out of those deals pretty easily if they don't work out. So, there's that's always helpful. But I think, with where this team is at right now, it feels like maybe a guy like a second contract guy like Deshaun Warden would have been a more ideal guy to go after for this defense and where they're at with as far as timelines are concerned. Again, those guys are in their 30s. Maybe it's like, it feels like maybe who knows how McCarthy's going to be. If he plays like, Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels did last year, with this infrastructure he has around him, then, those are the right moves. Getting those guys helps out. But, even if he's just good, just solid, then I think, and then waiting on next year to really take that next step, that's just kind of like, okay, well, those guys are another year older. And again, you can get out of those, but it's like, you paid those guys those deals, and you're still going to have some dead money off those deals, but it's just like, why do you make those deals then when you could have got a guy on a second contract for around that same market price and bring him in that fits more timeline with where the Vikings are at right now. So I don't know too much about them, but they definitely need to. They saw the need to go and address them, and you can't complain about that. They saw a clear need to get better up front, to get bigger, to get more reinforcements up front. They did that. I don't think you can knock that. It's just like how they went about it has me questioning it a little bit. But I mean, other than that, I think maybe they could have used that to address the secondary, as well. Because you take a look at their secondary. Malachi Blackman's coming off injury. Harrison Smith, he's still playing, but he keeps on getting, get another year older. So you have him get a little bit older, and you bring back Theo Jackson as well. You lose Cameron Bynum, who is a really good, really smart player for Brian Flores, and you got those guys, and then they didn't draft anybody with their few draft picks. So you did bring in Isaiah Rodgers, so you're really kind of counting on him to be one of those key guys. And when he stepped in, he's been solid, but now he's going to be counted on to be hey, you're starting week 1. Like, we want you to be good for us, right out the gate. So that's going to be, I think that's something where they could have done something a little bit differently, like how they allocated their resources. Again, maybe get a second contract defensive tackle, maybe go out and address, safety, corner, and get some help out there with losing the guys that they did. As far as the other piece on defense, listen, what you got in Grenard and Van Ginkel. Those two are a force out on the edges. Can Dallas Turner, their first-round pick from a year ago, can he become that same type of force where now you got 3 of those guys that you can rotate in? And if you're Brian Flores, if you got 3 of those guys, he's not going to know what to do with himself having 3 of those guys. So I think, if you have those, if you made those additions, you could have maybe not get too crazy with the blitzes and rely on just having a solid 4 to get after the quarterback. And even with Hargrave and Allen, with being in their 30s, I still think that's a solid group up front with those guys, where maybe you're not going to have to rely on just conjuring up black magic and just throwing up all these different creative blitzes out there, where you can just rush 4 and you can count on them to get after the quarterback. So we'll have to see. I feel like they could have added some more back there in the secondary. I think that's going to be a key spot for them to watch out for. That if we look back on this season and say, like, what was a problem with this defense, I feel like secondary is going to be a thing that's going to be brought up. And I think that they'll definitely have to address it next offseason. But we'll have to see. I feel like, again, they could have added a little bit more, and they could have changed up how they could have used their resources. But again, as far as the interior goes, it's hard to knock them. They saw some needs there. They wanted to get better up front, wanted to get more physical, and that's what they did. So, again, this division is going to be so much fun to watch. Just as a Titans fan, as a guy that plays fantasy football, it's going to be so much fun to watch these offenses, how they go, how they move, players from fantasy football, how they operate. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And again, this was a division last year that had three teams make the playoffs last year. And I think, the Bears got a whole lot better. And so if that's the case, then what's going to happen this year? Or are we going to have the same type of thing happen this year where three teams make the playoffs? So will teams swap out? It's going to be a wildly competitive division. It feels like these teams play each other all twice, so it feels like they might take each other out by subtraction. But this division is going to be so much fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to it as well. So everybody, that's going to do it for the NFC North. That's going to do it for the NFC. We're going to be moving on to the AFC, and I'm really excited about that because we get to talk about all of our teams coming up next. Chiefs, Steelers, Ravens, Titans. I know we're all really excited to kind of dive into our teams and see what unfolds for our teams in 2025. So you definitely want to stick around and hear us talk about kind of where we're kind of gauging our teams and seeing where we're gauging each other's favorite teams as of now. So you want to stick around for that as we roll along with the previews heading to the AFC on the next edition of the show, along with our college football previews, where we're going to be tackling the Big 12 next time on those previews, so you don't want to miss that as well. So everybody, that'll do it for this edition of the show. Again, thanks so much for tuning in, and also check us out where you guys get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. This is going to be up there. The AFC previews are going to be up there on YouTube, so you don't want to miss those as well. But that's all I have for you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys soon.